This week on the show, I'm talking to Carlo Sansonetti, a rigger who's worked in games and TV. We talk about the difference between movie and video game CG and what makes for the best CG characters. He also tells us about his website, CGCircuit, where he's helping CG experts develop a lucrative side income.
From JollyGoodJobs.com, it's the Jolly Good Show, discussing the games industry and life within it. Here's your host, Mark Pope.
Hello and welcome to the Jolly Good Show. This week I'm joined by Carlo Sansonetti. He's a rigger and works with me at Big Red Button. Hey Carlo, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm good. So I always like to start with a bit of a recap of your resume. So, like I just said, you're at Big Red Button with me at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, you were at Heavy Iron Studios for a total of about 5 years. And we overlapped there for most of that time.
Mm-hmm.
And, you taught for Gnomon, the sort of tutorial learning, organization, for about 4 years. And, I think the coolest thing, from my perspective is for about 4 years you worked at Lucasfilm. You also created CGCircuit, which is a website with tutorials for CG folks.
Mm-hmm.
So
correct.
I'll get to that later on, but first I've got to start with Lucasfilm. So what was it like getting to work on the Clone Wars?
It was surreal for most of my time there. I remember I was actually, the recruiter called me out of the blue. I was at an interview for another job in Austin, and the recruiter from Lucasfilm Animation called me up and said, "Hey, could you want to come here for an interview?" And I was blown away because I think probably like a couple of weeks before that, I was a Heavy Iron. Because I worked at Heavy Iron also before going to Lucasfilm, and me and I don't remember who the other person was, but the person who I was sharing the office with, we were drooling over how awesome the Clone Wars looked in the trailer that they released, right? Uh-huh. So I was very blown away by the fact that they called me up and set up an interview, and then after when I started there, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life because we were working at Big Rock Ranch, which is on the same property as Skywalker Ranch, the more famous Skywalker Ranch. Mm-hmm. And so just an amazing, it looked like almost like a Japanese temple, and on a lake and in the middle of nowhere, and on the hills of San Rafael. And so just the location was just amazing. But also I got the opportunity to work with just amazing people, like really, really talented people. And for most of my time there, I felt like I was, I don't know, the last in the class. I don't know how else to say it. But everybody was way smarter than me. So I learned a lot. There was actually I think it was the second week I was there. So when I was at Heavy Iron, I bought this book called The Art of Rigging. Mm-hmm. And I was in love with that book. Like I read it through and through and everything. And so then my second week at Lucasfilm, I was talking to the riggers, and we were in a room with a bunch of riggers. And I was like, the new kid in there. And I said, "Oh man, guys, you got to check out this book. It's an amazing book, especially to this one guy." And I was like, "Man, you got to check it out." And he goes like, "Oh yeah, what book is it?" "Oh, it's called The Art of Rigging. Check it out. I have it in my bag." And I take out the book, and the guy was looking at me with a weird look. And I was like, "What is it?" I wrote it. So that was my second week.
So did you get him to sign it?
Yeah, exactly. I almost like went on my knees, and I was like, I don't know. I wanted to I don't know. He became a god for me, so I wanted to I don't know.
That's cool.
Say prayers or something.
So you feel like you picked up a lot of learning there.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely was like 10 steps above what I was used to as far as technology around me and talented people, and there was a lot of influence from ILM as far as culture. So that was also really cool for me, because since I moved to the United States, I always love to learn more about ILM and how they do things. I own a couple of big books about their history. So being part of that company, it was just amazing. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
So before we go any further, then I've said you're a rigger, but so some people listening will know exactly what that means, and some people will have a sort of cloudier view. Can you give a bit of an overview of how an so I know that it's to do with animated characters. Can you give a bit of an overview of how an animated character gets made and what a rigger does in that process?
Yeah. So a rigger is basically the person that is between a modeler and animation and the animator, meaning that in the process, a modeler does the model of a character, and then the model gets sent or delivered to the rigger, and the rigger is basically the person that puts inside the model the bones, and in certain cases also muscles, and also gives basically an interface to animators, so that the animator can pick this interface, these controls around the character, and when they move, for example, the arm around, they the character behaves correctly, and deforms correctly. So it's a very my parents always ask me what do I do, and it's always a big issue to explain exactly what it is. But basically, the best way that I can describe it is, it's the way to make the characters deform correctly, so that when it's in the hands of the animators can push the character around and move it and create these crazy poses, really appealing poses, and yet the character, the mesh of the character, the model of the character responds well.
So there's these 3 steps right next to each other then. So the character artist before you makes the mesh, and that's just like a very static mesh, like somebody stood with their arms out sideways usually.
Yeah.
And there's no movement to it at all. And obviously we can't put that in the game because it doesn't move at all. And then the rigger adds the skeleton and any other sort of deformers to it to allow it to move, but it wouldn't actually, there's no recorded motions for it yet. Yeah. It's got the ability to move, but no, it's not got the motions. And then you hand it on to the animator, who actually sort of poses it and makes it run and walk and so on. It strikes me as a little odd that that's 3 separate people for something that, conceptually from the outside looks pretty simple.
Yes.
So like, couldn't the character artist, that makes the mesh also do the rigging, or couldn't the animator do the rigging? Why has rigging become its own speciality?
Here I would basically state my opinion, right? In my opinion, is it takes a certain kind of person to have the patience to go through that very, very technical yet very artistic process. Because you would have to know not only the anatomy of a character, and so when you think about a biped, you might know how bones are placed in your body, right? But what if you get a monster, like a creature that really doesn't exist in nature? Like, you have to use your imagination to place the bones inside of that character in order to make it deform in an appealing way. But also what a rigger has to always keep in mind is the math behind the 3D package. Because when the mesh is static, it's basically, though it looks beautiful, It's just a bunch of vertices that are placed in such a way so that the character looks the way it looks, right? But then because it's in 3D, if you want to move it in a certain way, the vertices have to be let's call it slave to these joints in a certain way, and the 3D package handles this transformation of vertices in a very specific way, and there is usually a lot of math involved, and so it's a rigger has to be a very, very technical person, but also somewhat artistic. And in my opinion, a modeler, or in my experience, most of the modeler or the character artists and the animators, they tend to be purely artistic people, like a lot more than what a rigger would be in terms of artistic skills. But they just don't have, a lot of times they just don't have the technical approach for making a rig. Now, having said that, the person who I consider one of the best riggers ever, his name is Jason Schleifer. He's the person who I learned everything from, not directly, but through his tutorials. He's an animator, or for a long time he's been an animator at DreamWorks, I believe. So there's always the exception to the rule, but in general, that's the reason why a rigger has to be in the middle.
I think so. I've been in development for a while, and rigger kind of popped up as a job title. It sort of popped up halfway through my career. I think like early on, there'd be skinned meshes and stuff, but I think it was just a lot simpler then. Like that, you'd have a character running around, but he'd be like 12 or 15 bones or something just down the main limbs, and maybe the math's not so bad for that one. But I think since that point where the bone counts just exploded, and the complexity of doing like facial animation and stuff has come in, and yeah, so I can see why it's such a specialized thing. Mm-hmm. I find it interesting as well that mix of artistic and technical, because you can end up being in code, being a rigger. In fact, I'm kind of curious, is it possible to be a rigger without coding?
Well, that's an opinion of mine, but my opinion is pretty strong in this case. And though I think that if you end up in a studio where they separate, so they use completely off the shelf tools, or they have such advanced proprietary tools that they actually hire like pure programmers to make those tools. Mm-hmm. So maybe in that case you can find a rigger that does not know how to code. But I never met one in my career, and I think you would have to, if you want to become efficient with your work, you have to learn how to code. Mm-hmm.
But it seems like well, actually, it kind of brings me on to like, how did you find your way into this position? Did you start learning to be an animator and then switch, or when did you know this is what I want to do?
Yeah, it was not a direct process for me, because I moved from Italy to the United States, and right away I was super interested in doing animation. So that's what I trained myself for the longest time. But in order to, especially at the beginning when I did not know a lot of people in the industry or even people in school, my English was not completely 100%. So for me, it was a little bit difficult to communicate with people. Mm-hmm. So in order for me to be able to animate something, I would have to rig a character so that I could animate it, right? So that's how I learned how to rig. I kind of taught myself how to do that so that I could animate. But then I was in the States. After graduation. I was looking for a job, and I could not find a job as an animator. And I actually applied at Heavy Iron as an animator because I saw that they had just an opening, and I assumed that it was for animation. But So then I applied, and then the animation director at the time, Mike Dietz, he said, actually, this position is for a rigger. And I said, well, I know how to rig. So let me put together a demo reel. And I got hired. And so, and then I started creating tools for Heavy Iron. And when I was at Heavy Iron at first, in the first 2-3 months, that's how I basically taught myself on the job how to code and mail. And then from there, I just taught myself a lot more. And again, when I got to Lucasfilm, that's when my learning process really improved a lot more.
Uh-huh. That's pretty cool. So you kind of squeaked through the interview and then learned on the job, kind of in at the deep end.
Yeah, but it's fun. It's great. In a way, it's great because I got to do, because I trained myself as an animator, I got to also on the project Ratatouille, when I was at Heavy Iron, after all the rigs were done, all the characters, the props, the tools were all done, there were still like a few months that I was basically not going to do anything, right? So I said, hey, I can animate. So they actually gave me a few characters to animate and also animate some cinematics for the game. And so I got to do both, which is great. I love to do that. Mm-hmm. Change it up a little.
That was something fun at Heavy Iron, was we got to work on, cause I was on Ratatouille too. Mm-hmm. And we got to work on, these sort of big Pixar titles like, Ratatouille, WALL-E, Incredibles. And it must have been fun for animators to be given okay, animate this character that's coming out in this movie, mm-hmm. Around the same time as our game.
Yeah.
And I know it was a lot of fun working with Pixar,
mm-hmm.
Back then. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. We got to fly up to, Emeryville and get to meet them, and sometimes, watch, a movie way before it was released, and just the animatic of the movie was just awesome experience. Yeah. Such a raw talent over there. It's great.
Uh-huh. So you're working on the game side of rigging, and the characters keep on getting better from each console generation to the next, and then you've got movie CG, and that looks a lot better still. I'm kind of curious, what kind of techniques are in state-of-the-art video games, and what are they doing in movies? What is that gap?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. That gap is getting narrower and narrower, smaller and smaller. The last 2-3 characters I rigged for game, they were basically, as far as geometry goes, more complex than what we had in the Clone Wars. So that tells you the amount of information, the amount of polygons that you can put on a console or a pretty powerful PC nowadays. But there are still some, if you go in the high end rigging, it's, as far as movies go, there is such a big push for making things more and more believable. Like, for example, the Gollum and the Hulk in the Avengers is just there's so much work in there, and all those rigs are done basically with muscle systems where you actually model and rig the actual skeleton of the character, and then on top of that, they basically model each individual muscle of the body, and the rigger has to rig those muscles the way that they deform, the way that they move, the way that they jiggle, and then on top of that, there is the geometry that basically is what you see, that is all simulated, so that the skin can slide over the muscles to get that a better sense of realism. And in a lot of cases, if the character has clothing, they model the underwear and then they simulate the underwear. They model the pants and simulate the pants. They model a shirt and simulate the shirt, and a jacket that goes on top of the shirt. So all of these simulations on top of simulation is just to really get that fidelity to the real thing. Now, that's I think the biggest gap between movies and games.
Underwear simulation.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy what they tend to simulate in movies nowadays. But again, I really think that games are not very far behind.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I went to I visited my friend at Digital Domain like a while ago, and they do effects for movies, and they've done a lot of famous movies. And I was in the foyer, and they've got this video reel running of sequences they've done in movies. And I remember as a kid, you'd go and watch a movie, and it was kind of fun to spot like the special effects. You'd be like, you'd sit there like, oh yeah, that's fake. That's a special effect. And when I went to Digital Domain, and even in recent years, I could still sort of say, okay, that's fake, that's real. I went to Digital Domain, saw this reel, and it was just like some soldiers running over a hill. It really kind of, it wasn't like stuff exploding or anything fancy. Soldiers running over a hill, plane going by above. And I thought, yeah, maybe that plane's CG, maybe. And then it replays it and shows like, this is us rendering the grass. This is us layering in this guy. This is us adjusting the lighting on the scene. This is how the plane's going in. And just the entire scene was totally constructed. And at that moment, I was like, okay, like that game is done. Like I can no longer tell reality from CG.
Yeah. Yeah, it's insane what they can do, especially with compositing, and it's just insane. I love it.
Yeah.
I love every aspect of it. It's pretty cool.
All right, I've got one more question on rigging before we move on. So, and this one goes out to all the riggers out there. So, do you have any special sauce for making a good rig? Like, if we say we're going to work on a new game, it's going to have sort of nice human-looking characters running around in an action setting. What would you be like? Okay, I'm going to bring out the big guns. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do my special thing. What would you do?
You touched a sensitive nerve right there.
The secrets.
The secret sauce. No, again, I'm going to give my opinion here. So there are two schools of thoughts on this. There is a school of thought that says that, yes, a rig you have to be able to do everything with a rig. And those rigs, in my opinion, again, they tend to become very convoluted, very difficult to use, very slow at times. So then the other school of thought, which is my school of thought, is that the special sauce, I think, needs to come from the animator. Because the animators are the people that are going to breathe life into the character. And so you just basically rely on what they want. You basically rely on what they want, because they're going to be the one using the rig. And so if you do whatever they ask to the rig to have, that's the best service that you can do to a rig itself. Because it's going to be used, with no issues. It's going to be used the way the animators want. And in the end, it's just going to look awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. So rather than just kind of like, I'm a rigger, I know what I'm doing, I'm going to make a fully complete human kind of thing.
Yes.
You more like have a dialogue with the animators of like, what are you trying to do with this character?
Exactly.
And then just do that. And, all the polish and sort of attention can go into what they really need rather than extra padding.
Yeah, but there is also something else to mention here that is really important, that it is true that I rely on what the animator needs, but a lot of times, like, you always have to keep in mind that the animator is most of the time is purely an artistic person, like a super artistic person, right? So when they ask for certain things, you kind of have to interpret it in kind of in a technical term, and just make sure that you communicate that you say, okay, we can do that, but if we do that, these might be the problems that arise. Again, because you know the math behind the software and you know what are the results of what that animator is asking. And if the animator is okay with it, then yeah, you do it. Otherwise, the animator says, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, let's do it this way. So it's always a collaboration between the animator, at least the way I work. I always like to collaborate with very, very closely to the animator and just provide the best, like the best balance I can between what the animator needs and what technically how smooth the rig will be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. And you sound just like a programmer when you say that, by the way.
In what way? I'm curious.
Well, we got the same thing. People will say, you know, oh, I need this feature. And it's like, well, what are the requirements? Like, what are we trying to do here? And,
I see.
You know, kind of take a step back from what's asked for quite often.
Yes. Yeah.
That's cool. So, we've got something in common in that we both kind of have side projects, and I'm always kind of interested in what people do, like in work and also what they do outside of work. So outside of work, you created CGCircuit.com.
Yes.
And, I'm going to let you describe it. How do you pitch that to people?
So basically CGCircuit is a marketplace, is a website where people can post and either for free or to sell for a price, video tutorials. So basically, instructional content that be either people can upload simple videos, kind of like YouTube, or full on, almost like full on courses, on demand courses, that are divided in chapters with multiple videos and example files, and so like a pretty good format for that kind of stuff, or instructional material, but also allows people to create workshops, online workshops, or e-classes, which are basically a way for people to actually teach online. So you can upload these videos and create a schedule saying, okay, this week I'm going to teach people this. And then this week I'm going to teach people that. And there is homework involved. There is feedback involved. And it's really a great way to connect industry professionals with, students and people that want to get into the industry. So it works great for both parties.
So it kind of reminds me of like Uber and other sort of what do they call it, sharing economy type things. So you got visitors coming in to learn, and then you got people coming in to teach.
Correct.
I imagine the pricing must be a tricky thing. Like it needs to be like courses and workshops. They need to be enough to make it worthwhile for the teacher, but a reasonable price for students. How does the money side of things work out?
So at the very beginning, when we started CGCircuit, we did a lot of research, just for pricing, because I knew also for myself, like I created the site out of pure passion of teaching and learning. And so for me, I knew that I was going to teach, content on there. And so even for me, it was a kind of a challenge to kind of figure out what the right price would be. So basically, we did a lot of research to see what is in general, right? Like if I have to put a dollar amount per minute of tutorial created, what would that be? And so we came up with the number of 28 cents per minute. So that's where we tell people, okay, you should probably start here, because that's the overall average that you have. Then after that, how rare the content you're creating it really is. And so you can, from the 28 cents per minute, you can increase it or decrease it depending on the strategy that you want to take. But I think that having a starting point really makes a big difference. As far as workshops go, what I tend to tell people is, these are not just courses that you create once and then you upload and then kind of sit back and see the money coming in. This is something that you are much more involved, right? Because yes, you need to create that content the first time, but then every time that a workshop starts, you're there to follow what students are doing and giving feedback and suggestions, even industry tips. So because of that involvement, what I tell to people is that if they have a freelance rate, that they should use that as a starting point for teaching a workshop. So that's usually how we do it.
So, can you give us an idea of like what are some of the top tutorials you've got? Because you said that some of them are quite rare and niche in terms of what the subject matter is. So, what kind of tutorials do you have on there? What's popular?
Yeah, we have most of the popular tutorials are technical, very, very on the technical side. We have an instructor who created a lot of tutorials, and a few of them are really extensive. One of them I think is 12 hours long. Wow. That it basically teaches people how to use the Maya APIs and how using the Maya APIs, how to create different kinds of plugins. And this is more geared towards, maybe not, but it's somewhat geared towards just a little bit more, towards the movie and visual effects, crowd, TDs. But because one of his most popular tutorial is just how to use the Maya APIs, which is basically the basics for everything in terms of making plugins, then that is the most popular because it can be used by people that are in games, people that are in visual effects, animation. So that's really popular. And that made, I think that specific tutorial is what made CGCircuit on the map, because for the longest time, there was no content out there, or a good one at least, that covered the Maya APIs. So now we have the Maya APIs and how to program the Maya Python APIs. That's also a very popular one. And just today, actually, we released another tutorial that I think is going to do great, which is skinning with Encloth, the part 2 of a tutorial that already was on the site and was also already very popular. And this is basically using those techniques that I was mentioning before, about modeling the actual skeleton of the human being, rig the skeleton, creating the muscles, rigging the muscles, making them jiggle and, feel realistic, and then put a skin on top of that is simulated with, actually Maya's, cloth system. So it's really sophisticated tutorial. And the person who created the tutorial, Andy Van Straten, he worked at Weta for a long time in their R&D department, and he most recently worked at ILM on Jurassic World to create the dinosaurs and stuff. So really, really talented guy. And I'm really happy and proud to be able to say that we got people of that caliber on CGCircuit. I love it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, the way I like these sort of directly connecting, people who want to learn to these kind of superstars of the field. Mm-hmm. And then you got workshops too, so you can be like directly learning from them and having video chats with them and that kind of thing. That's cool.
Yeah, the workshop is something that we recently started. Currently we have 5 that are available for people, and the system of workshops that we developed, we want to improve it. So we can't wait to get feedback from people and improve it more. But we already got some really good feedback saying that a lot of people really, really love it, how simple it is, yet you can do a lot of things, exchange of files and feedback, and the grade system, and it's really cool.
Cool. So I'm sorry to ask about money again, but how does it break down in terms of, if a tutorial costs like $100, like yes, how much of that goes to the teacher, and how does that work?
So historically, we the way that we divide the revenue stream is if a tutorial is $100 and that tutorial is sold, 70% goes to the instructor. So $70 will go to the instructor, and 30% goes to CGCircuit. Mm-hmm. However, just last week, we released a new functionality that allows instructors to embed on their site, or basically create a special link that they can give away and give to publications or put on their website or on forums. And basically, whenever people follow this link and they end up buying, after clicking that link, they end up buying the tutorial, during that transaction, the instructor actually makes 96% wow. of that transaction. And the cool thing is that, sometimes, somebody can click on that link and so go on CGCircuit, but then doesn't buy the content. And then maybe, I don't know, three days later, they go just to www.cgcircuit.com, browse for that tutorial and buy, right? So even in that case, the transaction will end up being 96% for the instructor, because the system remembers for a whole week, remembers that specific user clicked on that link. So, we're basically trying to make sure that the instructors make more money. So
that's cool. I'm gonna have to get some web development tips off you, because that's pretty sophisticated stuff.
Yeah, it's cool. It's super simple, but it's pretty
So, like 96%, that's a lot to pass on. I have some of the teachers made a lot of money?
Yeah, we have, again, this functionality, we just released it like last week, or the week before last. I don't remember now, but we already are seeing people, using it, and yeah, it's already making a big difference. In general, though, there are a few people on the site, that, they are making quite a bit of money. I think our bestseller made almost $35,000 in a year.
Wow!
And currently is making an average of $2,000 a month.
Wow!
And this basically before even the 96% was available. So I'm really curious now to at the end of this month to see the impact of the 96% for him. So I'm really excited.
And for you.
Yes. But I really like it when, so this person is able to, has his own business, and thanks to what he made from CGCircuit, he was able to pay for the software licenses and pay the rent. So when I hear those stories, it makes me, really, 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 really happy. So
I feel I should do a sort of some more full disclosure. So Carlo and I have been friends for years, through Heavy Iron, and when he started CGCircuit, he asked me if I'd be interested in putting up like a tutorial. So I recorded one. This is a few years ago now, and it's like first steps in C++. So it's kind of, just doing the basics of installing Visual Studio and writing functions and using variables and stuff. So it's pretty simple. And I put it up for I think it's like $4 or something.
Yeah.
And, since that point, I each month, I'm not one of your big sellers, but I'll get a mail from PayPal oh, you got $15 from CGCircuit. I'm like, cool, each time I do a little impulse purchase, like buying a game or something, I'm like, okay, that's my CGCircuit money right there. But just recently I was looking, and it gave a list of everybody of sort of how many people who've taken the course. And I looked at that, and something I like is teaching. I used to teach at Art Institute for a while. Mm-hmm. And when I looked at the list, it sort of for the first time hit me at least some of these people, hopefully had a good experience with my video and learned and got into programming a bit, because of it. Mm-hmm. and I felt good about that. So I imagine that for the instructors, there's kind of a mixture of things. Like partly, you get money for it, but that's not really what motivates everybody. And I think for people to be able to teach people and pass on what they know and what they're passionate about, I expect that's kind of, a lot of what drives people and what people get out of it by doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Like we see, both of those motivations for sure. And both of them are, I think they're great.
So what was it that drove you to make CGCircuit? And I'll be cheeky and say, if you're giving away 96% of the money, I'm hoping it wasn't, I hope it wasn't to be rich.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, I don't know if very few people know this, but, CGCircuit is an evolution of, what we wrote for a student short film that I did as my graduation piece. So I'll tell you a little story here. So basically, when I was at the Art Institute, I graduated the Art Institute in 2003, and so for a graduation piece, I made a short film. It was a 5-minute short film called The Auction, and which actually won a few awards around the world as best animation or the best short film. But the most rewarding, it wasn't really an award, but the most rewarding thing for me is that there was an article on Animation Magazine about my short film, because it was, at the time, it was the first short film ever made that was completely made online, basically from people all around the world. And at the time, we developed this very clunky system using Flash communication server. But they basically had a really nice interface, and it was a way for me to put out shots, and then having people that were interested from all over the world do their animation, submit their animation, and me watching it and give feedback. So it was a mini workshop system in a way, but to the common goal of creating this short film. And so when we created that system, the short film was done, and I made great friends during that process, everybody working on it. But then a few years later, I thought maybe, I don't know, there was something about that thing, collaborating online. So what if I create something that basically allows people to create content and also to connect them via, the teacher-student relationship, and to be able also to make money. And so that's why I basically came up with the idea of CGCircuit. And, I always wanted to learn web development, because web development since 2003 changed quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So I had to teach myself how to do it. And now it's an actual website that has thousands of people subscribe to it, and it's a big satisfaction for me. So it's not a money thing. I don't do it to become rich. Yeah,
that's really cool. So I've not heard that before, and so let me get this straight. Your final animation for your, was it like a degree or a course? Mm-hmm. Was you crowdsourced it? You probably did some pencil sketches of here's what I want, and then you crowdsourced it and handed that in. Boom!
Yep.
Like,
yep.
Was that not a bit cheeky? Wasn't like everybody else like hand animating, like showing?
No, actually the school really encouraged it. Really were really behind it, because it was such a novelty at the time. Because at the time, I mean, so the short film is about this little Italian, this Italian old man, not old man, but middle-aged man who still lives with his mom. But he's totally obsessed of buying robot toys from eBay. Now in the short film, I didn't say eBay. I called it Ubay, right? But that to tell you that the coolest thing at the time when I created a short film was eBay, right? So there was no Facebook, there was none of that,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So creating something on basically crowdsource wasn't even a word at the time. So it was really cool for a lot of people. And for me too, it was like a totally awesome experience because again, I made a lot of friends online and yeah, we're still in contact and it's great. And, so yeah, it was I think more than making the short film, it was making the short film the way it was made, which was cool.
Is it on YouTube or anything?
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Okay, I'll talk to you and I'll get a link and I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay, but so you know, it was made in 2003, and the story still holds up. I think the story is still strong, but the visual, especially the rigging, it's not.
All right, you've come a long way since there. Yeah.
Yes, I hope so at least.
Okay, so and. I'm probably going to reveal something of myself in asking this question. So like I've got Jolly Good Jobs and you've got CGCircuit, and I know other people with their own businesses. I've been wondering why people have a drive to chase dreams like these. Like on the one side, maybe it's a desire to be rich, or you've got some passion or theme to your life, like teaching or making fun games. On the other hand, though, it's a lot of time and stress and often not a lot of tangible reward. You could be spending more time with family, like playing games, watching movies, jogging on the beach. What else do they do in adverts for depression? You know, just generally having a nice time. Like, like when we get older, like, are we going to think, why the hell did I do that? You know, I should have been playing catch with my son. I guess I'm asking, like, is this something you wrestle with? And why do you think we do the things we do?
Yeah, I think about it all the time. I mean, so I work on CGCircuit after I come back from work and one day of my weekend. So that's the time that I dedicate to CGCircuit. That is developing it and teaching and all that stuff. So yes, there is a lot of time that I take out of my family. Like I could be spending with my family, but I am not. So there is no day that I don't think, why am I doing this? Right? Because again, it's not that, you know, again, it's not for the money for sure. So why do I do it? I think personally for me, and I know that it's just a personal thing. My grandfather was an entrepreneur, and he was a very successful entrepreneur. Has a big factory established, like gave you know a lot of jobs in the small town that I grew up in. But for some reason, it was because I grew up with him already being successful. I never thought about him being an entrepreneur, a person with, you know, money, right? But then one day I realized, I mean, my grandfather was the kind of person, you know, he was in the war. And so he was very, very tight with money. So he didn't have fancy clothes. He didn't have a fancy, like he had like a broken down car. So for me, he looked like a totally regular guy, right? Even underprivileged in a way, just because of the way he liked to live. And then when I started, when I was a teenager and I was, when I was a teenager and I started to understand what making a company it is, I was like, whoa, like you did all this, but you're not showing it. You know, you just go to work. He went to work until he was like 96 and he just loved it. And I think I got that gene where I just do something because I love it and I want my work to matter something and I don't want to leave something behind, something that matters. Right. And, so I think that's my driving, my driving bug, let's call it. Like when I was 19, was it 19 or 8? No, 17. I'm sorry. When I was 17, I actually opened my first company, which was a graphic design studio. I was still in high school. It was a graphic design studio in Italy, and that was so much fun. It was just a total rush. There is a whole story there that involves kidnapping that I'm not going to go into that right now. Yes, I was kidnapped for a few hours because a client. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that, but it's a cool story.
Okay, you're coming back on the show another time then.
Okay, sounds good. And but yeah, it was just great. It was a lot of fun. So this is all in southern Italy. That's why there's that involved. Anyway, yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. And so I think I have, for me, it's almost like, yeah, my grandfather is a huge figure in my life, and I think that's why that's my driving purpose.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think even though it's stressful and difficult, I think sort of from that challenge, there's also a lot of fun and satisfaction comes. And yeah, I think I kind of clearly I wrestle with this myself a bit. And recently I've decided it's my hobby. You know, like some people, you know, they like to buy expensive cameras and take photos, or they like to go rally car driving. And with me, it's like, oh, you know, this is my hobby. I want to make instead of building a model boat, I'm going to build a company.
Yes.
A model company. It's like a company, only smaller. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really nice to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great satisfaction to me. Like even if I won the lottery, I would still do it. Just, I don't want to sound, you know, what's the word you use? Cheesy.
Yeah.
But I definitely would, because I just love it.
You'd still do it. You'd just be wearing solid gold trousers.
Yes.
Awesome. Carlo, it's been really fun having you on, and I'm going to hit you up to come on a future episode, not least
Sounds
because
good.
I want to get that kidnapping story.
Yes.
Cool. So thanks for taking the time to come on, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. The show's excellent intro music is by Lazyitis, who you can find at soundcloud.com. The intro voice and audio production were by Garner Knutson. You can see the show notes and more at jollygoodjobs.com/show. The Jolly Good Show comes to you from jollygoodjobs.com, where you can find game studios nearby and maybe shorten that commute. Toodle pip.